All right, so if you have your Bibles, you may open them up to Genesis chapter 37. We're going to start in 37. There's quite a bit of text here. As I mentioned, we have Veyeshev and Miketz, and that takes us from 37 all the way to 44. That's a lot of information. There's a lot of tremendous and powerful and interesting things that happen in these two portions. And I just want to deal with a couple of them as best I can, okay? So I'm going to take you back to our opening slide. That is it, Genesis 37:1 through 44:17. I'm going to spend most of my time in Miketz, but I also am going to talk just a little bit about Vayeshev. Because this really sets the stage for one of the longest running narrative sagas in the Tanakh, which is the story of Joseph. And this is really powerful stuff. And I know that we have, as followers of Messiah, who are also rediscovering the power and the importance of Yah's Torah, that one of our primary tasks when we open up the Tanakh, the Old Testament, especially the Torah, we are supposed to be seeing Yeshua in the Torah. And I know that you guys have been studying the Torah cycles for a number of years, and you have seen these things. So it's not likely that I'm going to share anything new with you, but perhaps, you never know. But I think what's important here is a couple of things. Two passages in the New Testament, the renewed covenant, talk to us about a couple of things regarding specifically the Old Testament. One is that Yeshua says, you know, if you had believed Moses, you would believe me because he wrote about me. So that gives us a really strong indication that we should be able to see Yeshua in the Torah if we just look. And the second thing is that Paul tells us that the Torah was written for us upon whom the end of the ages has come. So this is an important part of studying the Torah. Those are the two primary, well, not primary, maybe they're not primary, but they're certainly of critical importance. And second and thirdly, I would say the Torah contains our instructions for life. You know, how do we live? That's what Torah means, right? It's instructions. It's just blessings. It's blessings and curses. You know, it's instructions for how to live. So we need instruction. We need understanding of, I think that seeing the Messiah Yeshua in the Torah is of critical importance for one primary reason that I can think of off the top of my head, and that is that we don't want to believe that Yeshua is the Messiah simply because someone told us it was so. That is presumption. I presume that Messiah is Yeshua because my grandmother taught me that when I was a kid. That's great. That's a nugget of faith, I would say. The milk of the word, if you want to call it that. However, it's diminutive. It's small to believe that Yeshua is the Messiah of Israel simply because somebody told you so. What is more powerful is for you to be able to look through the whole of the Bible and see with absolute precision and clarity, it could be no one else. It will be no one else. Yeshua is the Messiah of Israel, and it is provable by prophetic utterance throughout the whole Bible. It is undeniable. Anybody who denies it doesn't have the Spirit of Yah, right? You can't see the Messiah of Israel without the Spirit of Yah. Yah has to open your eyes to be able to see that. In the same way that Yah has to open up your eyes, and he did open up your eyes to see the validity of his entire word from front to back, right? It's not because you're clever. It's not because somebody with good arguments came to you and said, let me tell you why this is so. It can be convincing, and you should definitely be able to defend your faith, but that's not the reason you can see. He grants vision, right? So these are the important things that I want to talk about today. Okay, you're seeing Yeshua in the Torah and possibly gaining some insight into the end, because Miketz means in the end, at the end, which is interesting. We'll talk about that in a moment. So just briefly in review, last time we were together, we're talking about Jacob's struggle with his past and Yah. We were talking about seeking blessings by other means, taking a shortcut to blessings. That's always a trouble. Recognizing our true sparring partner. It's not your circumstances. It's not the situations that are happening around you. It's not that you're sick. It's not that you're being tested physically, spiritually, emotionally. Those are just the circumstances through which your Heavenly Father is speaking to you and teaching you and testing you and proving you, right? And then there's self-control versus external control. We talked about the spirit man and the flesh man, Jacob and Esau. Your task as a believer with the Spirit of Yah is to control yourself, not to seek to control people and circumstances around you. That's the important part. Now, moving into Genesis 37, today we will talk a little bit more about family struggle. Our most important learnings, as I mentioned, are Joseph and Yeshua and parallels between Egyptian feast and famine and perhaps the end of the age. And what should we do with this information? How can it be applicable to us today? All right, so I want to start with opening up our Bibles and reading Genesis chapter 37. So it's going to be story time with Uncle Alan this evening for a few minutes. So here is Genesis 37, starting in verse 1, and this lays the groundwork. This lets you know right off the bat that Joseph is really important. You notice that it says these are the family records, these are the generations of Jacob, and then it just says Joseph. Doesn't give you any details about the generations of Jacob. Not a lot. This whole story is completely about Joseph. And it just says these are the generations, in verse 2, this is the family records of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph. But in the Hebrew text, it literally just says Joseph and then carries on with it talking about him. So it's weird that we would say these are the generations of Jacob, Joseph. He's letting you know this is really, really important guy. So
the Hebrew text doesn't say 17 years of age?
No, that comes afterwards. And it's just like Spanish a lot of times. The subject comes before the action.
Still in there.
It's there, yeah, of course.
Okay.
So I'm reading from the Holman Christian Standard Bible. If you want, here we go. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. These are the family records of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended sheep with his brothers. The young man was working with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought a bad report about them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than his other sons because Joseph was a son born to him in his old age, and he made a robe of many colors for him. There's the Technicolor Dreamcoat. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. Then Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I have had." He actually said in the Hebrew, "Behold," you're going to love this. "There we were, binding sheaves of grain in the field. Suddenly, my sheaf stood up, and your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. Are you really going to rule over us?" His brothers asked him. "Are you really going to rule us?" So they hated him even more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream and told it to his brothers. "Behold," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." He told his father and brothers, but his father rebuked him. "What kind of dream is this that you have had?" he said. "Are your mother and brothers and I going to come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. You ever heard that expression before? Kept the matter in mind?
Was Rachel alive at this point?
No. That's what Mary said when the angel spoke to her about the birth of Messiah. That might be a clue. His brothers had gone to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, Your brothers, are pasturing the flocks at Shechem. Get ready. I'm sending you to them. Right, behold, here I am. I'm ready, Joseph replied. Then Israel said to him, go and see how your brothers and the flocks are doing and bring back word to me. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. A man found him there wandering in the field and asked him, what are you looking for? I'm looking for my brothers, Joseph said. Can you tell me where they are pasturing the flocks? They've moved on from here, the man said. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph set out after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him in the distance, and before he had reached them, they plotted to kill him. They said to one another, here comes that dreamer. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. We can say that a vicious animal ate him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. When Reuben heard this, he tried to save him from them. He said, let's not take his life. Reuben also said to them, don't shed blood. Throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him, intending to rescue him from their hands and return him to his father. When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he had on. Then they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat a meal. They looked up, and there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were carrying aromatic gum, balsam, and resin going down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, what do we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And they agreed. When Midianite traders passed by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, the boy is gone. What am I going to do? So they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a young goat, and dipped the robe in its blood. They sent the robe of many colors to their father and said, behold now, we found this. Examine it. Is it your son's robe or not? His father recognized it. It is my son's robe, he said. A vicious animal has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes and put sackcloth around his waist and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, I will go down to Sheol, the grave, to my son, mourning. And his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. So there's the introduction of the reader to Joseph. I know that and I'll ask you to share, because I know you probably saw a lot of very interesting things right there. What would you say is a messianic parallel in that passage? What did you see in there that ties together with the Messiah Yeshua? Hayden, what do you say?
They plotted to kill him before he even arrived.
They plotted to kill him before he even arrived. That's an excellent point. That's a very good one. Who is it? It's Tracy Tim. What's up, Tracy Tim?
Hello. Couple of things. That part stood out. A couple of new things, should I say? Because there's lots of stuff in here. But for me, when Jacob said to Joseph, he told him to go check on his brothers. This is what Messiah was sent to do, like the parable of the vineyard and all that stuff, to check on the generation kind of thing that says, "Come and I will send you to them." And he said, "Here I am." It's like "Here I am, send me," and that reminds me of Isaiah 6:8. Who will go for us? Yep. Here I am, send me. And then Messiah goes in and sees that his brethren are doing wickedly, and instead of shepherding the flock, they're feeding themselves and all that stuff. Right. And then the other thing that I thought was kind of interesting is how Reuben was trying to keep him from being killed, or he was going to try and save him and turn him to his father. And Reuben's name means "you see a son." So there's kind of a messianic thing there. I think that maybe he's saying, let's not let any of this blood come upon us, and trying to preserve his life, maybe. Right. Good insight. Good insight.
Reuben was in the role of pilot.
Reuben playing the role of Pilate. That's interesting. That's an interesting insight. Sir Seal.
The pieces of silver, the 20 pieces of silver,
Yes.
that they sold Joseph for, was very similar to what Judah betrayed Jesus for.
Right. Well, and there you mentioned Judah. Both of them were betrayed by a guy named Judah. Judas is just a slight variation of the word Judah. It's the same name. So that's a good one. That's absolutely a good one.
Both are looking for greedy gain as well.
Yes, that's correct. That is correct.
It's not a big insight, but I've never noticed that it said they had the camels and the myrrh and going down to Egypt.
Isn't that
The
interesting?
camels brought the myrrh to Yeshua when he went to Egypt for Africa.
Ooh, yeah. Did you hear that? Jen was talking about how she noted in this passage that it was talking about myrrh and aromatic gums and stuff like that going down to Egypt, and it reminded her of Joseph of Arimathea bringing these same kind of spices to anoint the body of Yeshua, prepare the body of Yeshua for burial. That's a good insight. I hadn't thought of that either.
Yeah, I think were you talking about when he was born and given that stuff and then they
Oh.
went to Egypt?
Sorry.
The same thing.
Yes.
Happened twice.
Sorry, it did happen twice, both at his birth and his death. Yeah, good insights. Fascinating. You guys are good. You're picking up on some really interesting parallels. You've probably seen this, but if you just did a Google search for like parallels between Messiah, Yeshua, and Joseph, you'll find a big list of them. There are a lot. Some of them are slightly stretching it, they're grasping a little bit, but most of them are really, really solid. Fascinating stuff. Any other ones, Tracy Tim?
I'm thinking Mike might have pointed this out to me, with Joseph's dreams. The first one is like an earthly vision and the second one's a heavenly vision.
That's
So
right.
there's like two witnesses, heaven and earth.
Right.
And that reminds me of John 3:12 when Messiah says, if I told you earthly things and you do not believe, how shall you believe if I tell you heavenly things? And of course this is all very messianic, that his brothers, Messiah's brethren would be bowing to him even if they didn't on earth, they were going to in the heavenly
Right.
realm.
Good insight. Yeah, Brett.
You see that Joseph's garment was torn to pieces, Yeshua was torn to pieces.
Yes, the garments of Yeshua and the garments of Joseph. There's definitely, when do you see Yeshua with a blood-stained garment? In Revelation. That's right. It's not in the Gospels, it's in Revelation by one of the Gospel writers. So that's a fascinating one. Mike?
Can you hear me?
I can.
All right. I heard a new one this week that I thought was interesting, and it's in regard to the heavenly dream. So you've got the sun, moon, stars representing the brothers, 11 brothers, and then mom and the dad. So there's 13. And in Genesis 1:14, the sun, moon, and the stars represent time. They the authority over the day and night. They are there for appointed times. They represent periods of time.
Right.
If you take he's 17 and you add 13, you get 30. And Joseph comes into power at the age 30, just as Yeshua did.
Yep. Good insight.
I thought that was kind of an interesting parallel with the count. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Mike. That's great insights. And I would say both in regards to what Mike and Tracy both were saying, in regards to the two dreams, you should consider that there are, between these two portions, there are 6 dreams. That's a lot of dreaming. That's like California dreaming. Yeah, there's a lot of dreaming going on here. And we got the 2 dreams by Joseph, the butler and the cupbearer both had a dream. Pharaoh had 2 dreams. So that is 6 dreams. Did I say 6? 6 dreams in this Torah portion, and the one between these 2 Torah portions. Dreams and visions have a very powerful message in these 2 Torah portions. And so you might want to pay special attention to those. Joseph is 17. He dreams of the sun and moon and stars also. Yeah, I was just about to hit on that a little bit more. These two dreams that Joseph has are very, very interesting. I think it's pretty apparent, like Mike was suggesting, that these two dreams represent pretty clearly, if you think about it, the first and the second coming of the Messiah Yeshua. In the first dream that Joseph has, we have stalks of wheat, right? Notice that when you gather wheat into bundles, you have to cut them down first, right? You kind of have to. You don't just put rubber bands around them as they're growing out of the ground. You cut them and you put them into bundles. Well, he says we grabbed these bundles and yours bowed down, but mine stood up. Well, that kind of reminded me of, if you cut it down, that's like Messiah Yeshua being killed. But then when it raises back up, that's like resurrection. Okay? And then the brothers bow down to him. That is signifying, in my opinion, the first coming of Yeshua. The second vision happens in the sky. He is here, and his 11 brothers, father and mother, sun and moon, are surrounding him. This speaks to me of the return of the Messiah. For one primary reason, because it's in the heavens, and secondly, because you have a hint of resurrection in this one as well. His father said to him, "What, are me and your mother going to bow down to you?" Well, his mother's dead. She gave birth to him and died in childbirth 17 years ago.
No.
No, not to Joseph,
No.
to
Benjamin.
Benjamin.
Sorry about that. Yes. But his mother's dead. She's been dead for a couple of years at least. So, I mean, we don't know exactly the ages of these two boys in relation to each other, but she's been dead for some time. So it's slightly unusual that Jacob would say, are your mother and I and all your brothers going to bow down to you? It's kind of suggestive of another type of resurrection, because his mother is going to bow down to him, but not until she's resurrected. So that's an interesting thing. Any other messianic parallels? And believe me, there are a ton of them. You notice that it says that he is the son of his old age. Well, the son of his old age can also be translated as a son of wisdom. Wisdom and old age are kind of synonymous in the Bible. In fact, it's really similar Hebrew terms. So he's a son of wisdom, which Yeshua certainly was, yeah?
He begins with God, is sent to his brothers, goes down into the pit, comes back up and goes out to the nations, saves them from doom, and then his brothers return.
There's a whole beautiful picture, yes, of
Just where he goes is a whole
where he
message.
goes is a whole message. It absolutely
So cool,
is.
I never did.
Yeah, it's very cool. So you can think about, he goes to the Gentiles. He goes and lives among the Gentiles. He marries a Gentile bride. Here's a fascinating one. The bride that he marries is the daughter of the sun worshiper, Helios. Helios, the Egyptian sun god. Now, I don't, that's a little bit unusual, but maybe not when looked at from a prophetic standpoint. That Yeshua has kind of been wed to a Gentile bride who is learning to become cleansed of her former pagan worship. There's some very strange, interesting parallels here. Any other comments regarding parallels? Like I said, there's a ton of them, and there's some of them are super cool and very complex.
He went out of Hebron, which is the seat of association, and went to Shechem, the place of burden.
Right. Yes, that's a good one. Here's something that's interesting that I hadn't discovered before this week, and that is, you notice I mentioned, who is it? It's Tracy Tim. What's up, Tracy Tim?
Oh, I can wait till you're done.
Oh, okay. I mentioned that there were multiple references to dreams in this passage, and in both of these passages. And I noticed that there were not only multiple references to dreams in these passages, but garments.
clothing. You know, you got him with this fancy robe of some kind. You got the robe being dipped in blood, being taken to Jacob and saying, hey, do you recognize this? We got Judah, who has sex with a prostitute, seemingly, but it's actually his daughter-in-law. And he has to identify, using the exact same words, examine this, please. Does this belong to you? More garments. You got Joseph, when he's down in Egypt, being seduced, an attempted seduction by his master's wife, who rips the garment off of him as he flees from the house. You got a lot of attention paid to garments here in these passages. So I started to look a little bit more closely at these passages regarding garments. And one of the things that caught my attention is the idea of Joseph's Technicolor dream coat, or whatever it is, okay? So I'm not even certain where this multicolored coat thing came from, because that's not really what the Hebrew says. The Hebrew word for this coat is pas, which is basically a Hebrew word for hand or hand breadth. It can also be the length of a foot. What that is suggesting is that it's really about measurement, not about a color. And what is suggested is that it's called the text says pasim, which probably means long, many hand breadths. Pas is hand or foot length. Pasim is many hand breadths or foot lengths. It is a flowing robe with long sleeves, most likely. And what's interesting about that is that it's a rather distinctive garment in those days that is primarily only worn by rulership and priests or kings or princes or something like that. So his father gave him a rather distinctive robe that signified his authority and his power, not only from a kingly, princely perspective, but also perhaps from a priestly perspective. And I want to share with you this brief little passage that I found from, before I do that, Tracy, I can pause right here. What do you got? Because I might launch here for a minute.
Oh, okay. I was just going to point out something cool about verse 33 about my son's long coat, an evil beast has eaten him, surely Joseph is torn in pieces. That's prophetic for the tribes of Israel. And Joseph is a representation of that. So first of all, he's got this robe that's torn, and that's this prophet that came to Jeroboam that tore the garment into 12 pieces, and 2 were going to go with Rehoboam, and the 10 were going to go with him. So there's that imagery there.
Yeah.
But the idea of an evil beast eating him is because Ephraim or Joseph or Israel became lost among the nations, and the nations are these wild beasts, these evil beasts. Like Jeremiah, one example says, Israel is a scattered sheep driven away by lions. First the king of Assyria devoured him, and last Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, crunched his bones. So there's a lot of verbiage like that about the nations devouring and eating. So
very nice, very nice. You guys have hit on so many powerful proofs between the parallels of Messiah Yeshua and Joseph. And I would say it would be real easy for you to just continuously reinforce Yeshua is the Messiah. There's no question about it. You'll never accidentally convert to Judaism, right? Which happens with a lot of people in our movement. Not a lot, but some. They go wayward and they kind of get tricked by the anti-missionaries into thinking Yeshua is not the Messiah. That's you'd really have to be willingly ignorant to veer down that path. But in regards to this other passage regarding Joseph's dream coat or whatever it is, I want to share this with you. This is from Josephus's Antiquities, book 3, chapter 7, verse 4. It says, over this, he's talking about the high priest's garment. Because we get very little detail. Well, there's a decent amount of detail in regards to the priestly attire in the book of Genesis, or in the book of Exodus, chapters 27, 28, 29. However, it doesn't go into a whole lot of detail about the robe or the overcoat or whatever that the priest wears. So Josephus' Antiquities gives you some interesting insights. It says, over this he wore a coat that reached the sash, the girdle, you'll get into it. Over this, he wore a coat that reached to his feet and was bound by a girdle ornamented with the same colors and embroidery as the ephod had. It is called in our language meir and is woven evenly in rings. The warp was entirely purple, but the weft was of different colors, gold being intermixed with linen. This vesture was not composed of two pieces, nor was it sewn together upon the shoulders and upon the sides, but it was one long vestment woven throughout from top to bottom, with a hole for the head in the middle and with sleeves for the arms. So this is Josephus telling us that the high priestly garment is one long flowing robe of one piece. What does that remind you of?
Yeshua.
That reminded me of Yeshua when I looked in John chapter 19, where it says that these soldiers crucified Yeshua and they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, a part for each soldier. They also took the tunic, which was seamless, woven in one piece from the top to the bottom, from the top. So they said to one another, let's not tear it, but cast lots for it to see who gets it, because it's a valuable garment. They did this to fulfill the scripture that says, they divided my clothes among themselves and they cast lots for my clothing. And this is what the soldiers did. So this is interesting because it suggests to me that the garment that Joseph had was possibly multicolored, but more than likely a long flowing robe that signified authority or possibly even priesthood. And Yeshua also has the same type of outer garment. What does that suggest to us? That suggests that this prefiguring of Joseph and the Messiah is suggesting that he is not only a king, but a priest. And that's an interesting thing because we know that Yeshua is both a king and a priest. And that's a powerful thing because we don't see that those two things combined in any of the tribes of Israel. There's a kingly tribe and there's a priestly tribe, and those two things don't go together, except in this one man, Yeshua, the Messiah. So there are some interesting messianic parallels in Genesis 37. Now, like I said, we can't cover everything there, going all the way through the stuff like that. But I did want to share one other thing. We won't be able to, as I was going to say, I lost my train of thought there for a second. All these chapters we can't go through, but a couple of important things is that the Messiah in the Torah. This next one is just something that came to my attention that I want to share with you, and this is from Proverbs 6. And you guys know these. It says there are 6 things that Yah hates and even 7 things that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift to run to evil, a false witness that pours out lies, and a person who spreads discord among family members. Frankly, you guys, what do we see in this passage? All of them. All of these things happened. Huh? Haughty eyes are proud eyes.
Looking down on people.
Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, if there's... That is a good question. Where's that in the passage?
Joseph.
Haughty eyes. Prideful. Pride. Where do we see pride in this passage? Huh?
Joseph.
In Joseph himself. Joseph, for a long time, I thought there's only a very few people in the Bible that it doesn't tell you anything negative about them. Not a single thing. Yeshua is one of them, for sure. For a long time, I thought Joseph, it was almost nothing negative to say about him. But that's not entirely true. There is a fairly clear indication that he had a touch of pride about him because he was special of his father. Now, hey, every metaphor breaks down. You're not going to see Yeshua compared to Joseph, and Joseph is also perfect. We do have to know that Joseph is a real human being. He is not the Son of God. He is not sinless. But we do get some pretty strong hints that because he was favored of his father, he felt very special. He was probably a little bit arrogant, and he seemed to revel a little bit too much in telling his brother his dreams of how he was going to rule over them. So we do see a little bit of haughty eyes here. But this is the interesting part, is that all of these, bless you, things that Yah hates are seen in this family. All of them. The thing that troubles me is, do you see these things in his family still? Yes, you do. You absolutely do. Among the brethren, among Christians, among us, we see these things. Now, don't take it literally. What is a metaphor for standing in your brother's blood? Remember that if you look this up and you start learning a little bit of the rabbinic commentary regarding evil speech, it literally is translated from the Hebrew, standing in your brother's blood. So they see evil speech as standing in your brother's blood. You're destroying his reputation. You're killing his reputation, so to speak. So don't take this so literally, like we're not slaughtering each other and dipping robes in blood and throwing each other into pits, but in a metaphorical sense we might be. If we're talking trash about one another, being jealous, having pride, we're better than you because we observe Shabbat, we're better than you because of this, I'm better than you because of that. Spreading discord, holy macaroni. We are the princes and princesses of discord. Sowing discord is a specialty of ours.
We have a Discord server.
Right, what's that?
Discord. What Discord server are we in?
What Discord server are we in? Yes, we use Discord.
Have a Discord server.
We do have a Discord server where Discord does not happen on our Discord server. That is kind of ironic. That's the one place where we seem to have lots of peace and people sharing prayer requests and praise reports. That's kind of funny, actually. But no, I mean, these things are really powerful and they're with us today. And these are the things that God hates. And you see it very strongly in this passage. And unfortunately, you're still seeing it fairly strongly among his people. And I think, and I have mentioned this many, many times over the years, that this is our chief struggle. This is our chief struggle amongst ourselves, is to overcome the evil amongst our own selves and in our own hearts. It's delightful that we're observing Shabbat, but how are we treating each other? I think that's going to be the important thing that he tells us to look at. And I would just remind you that getting close to Yah is critical and helping us to see these things. Because we don't want. Have you ever noticed that when you commit a sin, when you do a tactical blunder, that you don't really feel close to God for a little while? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do something stupid, it kind of pulls you away from God. Now, God didn't go anywhere, you did, right? But if we can draw near to him, ask for forgiveness, I think praying and reading his word, those are the ways that we get close to him. But you don't want to pray to God. You don't want to read his word when you feel like you've done something stupid. So, just want to encourage you to be in prayer, especially for one another. Be in his word, especially in the Torah portions, especially in anything. Anything in his word is going to be profoundly powerful for you. So stay connected. It'll actually keep you from sinning. Isn't there a passage somewhere that talks to you about keeping you from sinning? Does anybody remember that passage? No. Isn't it in 1 John? It says, "My brothers, I have shared these things with you to keep you from sinning." Was that Angela?
Oh, no.
Okay. Yeah, look at 1 John, because I'm pretty sure 1 John talks about these things. So pay attention to that. I think you'll be appreciative. Now,
Before you move on,
you may hand her a microphone, someone.
got it.
What's up, Angelina?
I was looking at that thing about torn to pieces, the
Yes.
garment when it was torn to pieces, and then they brought it to Jacob and showed it to him as evidence. And there's another place in there where that word for torn to pieces is used. And
Is that like where we get the Hebrew word treif?
maybe
What's the word?
Torah.
Trough.
Or
Treif.
terol.
That's where they get the
Yeah.
Hebrew word for treif, torn meat, yeah.
So it's in the laws about what to do if your neighbor borrows something and it's damaged or whatever. But and most of the time there's some kind of restitution being made. But There's a verse in Exodus 22 that says, if it is torn to pieces, let him bring it as evidence. And then it says, he shall not make restitution for what has been torn to pieces. And I was thinking, where you had the garment of Joseph brought to his father as evidence, and then you had Yeshua's garments torn, that maybe there's this one way where a person is not responsible and does not have to make restitution, and if it's torn to pieces. And so was that like a picture of grace? Like that was the one avenue left open for our redemption and our restitution was the torn to pieces? Because any other way it was damaged, there was some way that a person was being held responsible, except for this one thing.
Wow. Did you just come up with that yourself?
I'm
You're
sorry,
so
I wasn't paying
smart.
attention for a few minutes. I was looking around in there. You caught me. I'm sorry.
Very clever. Very clever. Good wisdom, Angela.
Exodus 22, you said?
22:13.
That is a fascinating passage.
It's just that, I don't know, maybe.
No, that's
Maybe I'm
an
not
interesting
understanding.
insight. That is a very interesting insight. I appreciate you sharing that with us. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to talk about, I'm going to jump over to Genesis 41. So if you would, you can jump over to Genesis 41, and I want to deal with just a little bit of perhaps end times parallels between the dream of Pharaoh and Joseph interpreting those dreams, and then what happens as a result of those dreams. Now, this continues into next week's Torah portion, and perhaps we'll touch on that a little bit more when we get together in our first week in January for our family midrash. So, contemplate that. But what I want you to do is I want you to open up your Bibles to Genesis 41, and I'm going to start at verse 14. I want to familiarize you a little bit. In the beginning of Genesis 41, you actually get the first iteration of Pharaoh's dream. We're going to get the whole of it here because he's going to retell it to Joseph, so we just skip that first telling. Okay, so this is Genesis 41:14, and here's what it says. Then Pharaoh summoned Joseph. This is after the chief cupbearer had said, "Oh man, I screwed up. There was a dude who could interpret your dreams. Go get him." So then Pharaoh summoned Joseph, and so they brought him quickly out of the dungeon. He shaved himself. Fascinating insight. Look into that. Changed his clothes, and I would say specifically look into the first time that the Hebrew word shaved comes into the text. He changed his clothes and came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. But I have heard about you that you can interpret dreams." And Joseph replied to Pharaoh, "It is not within my power. But Elohim will speak concerning the peace or the welfare of Pharaoh." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream I was standing by the edge of the Nile. Then 7 fat and fine-looking cows were coming up out of the Nile, and they grazed in the reeds. Then 7 other cows came up after them. They were scrawny, very bad-looking, and lean. I had never seen such bad-looking cows as these in all the land of Egypt. The lean, bad-looking cows ate up the 7 fat cows. When they had eaten them, no one would have known that they had done so, for they were just as bad-looking as before. Then I woke up. I also saw in my dream 7 heads of grain growing on one stalk, full and good. Then 7 heads of grain, withered and thin and burned with the east wind, were sprouting up after them. The thin heads of grain were swallowed up. They swallowed up the 7 good heads of grain. So I told all this to the diviner or priests, but no one could tell me its meaning. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "Both dreams of Pharaoh have the same meaning. Elohim has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows represent 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain represent 7 years. Both dreams have the same meaning. The 7 lean, bad-looking cows that came up after them represent 7 years, as do the 7 empty heads of grain burned with the east wind. They represent 7 years of famine. This is just what I told Pharaoh. Elohim has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the whole land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will occur after them, and all the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will devastate the land. The previous abundance of the land will not be remembered because of the famine that follows, for the famine will be very severe. The dream was repeated to Pharaoh because the matter has been decreed by Elohim, and Elohim will make it happen soon.
2 witnesses?
2 witnesses, there you go. So now, Pharaoh should look for a wise and discerning man and give him authority over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh should do this. He should appoint officials throughout the land to collect 1/5 of the produce of the land during the 7 years of abundance. They should gather all the excess food during these good years that are coming. By Pharaoh's authority, they should store up grain so the cities will have food, and they should preserve it. This food should be held in storage for the land in preparation for the 7 years of famine that will occur throughout the land of Egypt. In this way, the land will survive the famine. This advice made sense to Pharaoh and all his officials. So Pharaoh asked his officials, Can we find a man like Joseph, one in whom is the spirit of Elohim? So Pharaoh said to Joseph, Because Elohim has enabled you to know all this, there is no one as wise and discerning as you are. You will oversee my household, and all my people will submit to your commands. Only I, the king, will be greater than you. See here, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I place you in authority over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his own hand and put it on Joseph's hand. He clothed him with fine linen clothes and put a gold chain around his neck. Pharaoh had him ride in the chariot used by his second in command, and they cried out before him, Kneel down. So he placed him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your permission, no one will move his hand or his foot in all the land of Egypt. Notice hand and foot again. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphanath-Paneah, seemingly the revealer of secrets. He also gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, to be his wife.
What does her name mean?
I don't. Okay. So Joseph took charge of all the land of Egypt. Now Joseph was 30 years old when he began serving Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Joseph was commissioned by Pharaoh and was in charge of all the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced large, bountiful harvests. Joseph collected all the excess food in the land of Egypt during the 7 years and stored it in the cities. In every city, he put the food gathered up from the fields around it. Joseph stored up a vast amount of grain like the sand of the sea until he stopped measuring it because it was impossible to measure. 2 sons were born to Joseph before the famine came. Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, was their mother. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, saying, Certainly Elohim has made me forget all my trouble in all my father's house. They named the second child Ephraim, saying, Certainly Elohim has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. The 7 years of abundance in the land of Egypt came to an end.
Potiphar isn't the same as Potiphar, right?
No, that is not the same.
Okay.
Then the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had predicted. There was famine in all the other lands throughout the land, but throughout the land of Egypt there was food. When all the land of Egypt experienced the famine, the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, and Pharaoh said to all the people of Egypt, Go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you. While the famine was over all the earth, Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. The famine was severe throughout the land of Egypt. People from every country came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain because the famine was severe throughout the earth. Okay, so fascinating stuff here, but in your estimation, and this is a contentious subject, obviously, and you don't need to go too deep into it, but in what ways might you see, or do you see any parallels between what your understanding of like end time stuff is and this passage? Do you see any parallels there? One of the things that I was taught as a boy or young man was that there was a 7 years of this and 7 years of that in the end times, okay? 7-year peace treaty and stuff like that. Both of those conceptions have since been blown out of the water, and I think those are completely wrong. I think those are just popularized by the Left Behind series by Tim LaHaye or whatever his name is. Certainly a fascinating book, but it is fiction. It is based upon the Bible. It is not the Bible. That is not where you get your theology from. So so I'm a little bit confused about the 7-year period, but I do see some similarities here. One of the things that captured my attention that I will share with you is this. Just think about this. Pharaoh has a dream that there's going to be 7 years of really, really good times. Great, plentiful abundance. Then there's going to be 7 years of famine. Now, one of the obvious parallels is that Joseph comes to the rescue and pretty much saves the whole earth. It tells you that this famine was very widespread and that people were coming to him from all over the place to be rescued, to be saved. This, not only that, but we have the regathering of the tribes of Israel. Do you think it's interesting that the 10 tribes over here are reunited with the 2 tribes who were already in the Gentile nation? They regather together when Joseph sends for his father in the next Torah portion. So you got the 10 and the 2 tribes being regathered at the end. Remember, this Torah portion means at the end. It's interesting also that we're reading about the end in Bereshit. What does Bereshit mean? In the beginning. In the beginning, the end. What does that remind you of? The first and the last. The first and the last. It also reminds me of, behold, I tell you the end from the beginning. Okay, so there's understanding that, and Melissa Aylwine, if you've ever listened to her, will tell you that, there's a lot of stuff in the Torah portions that is definitely about the end time. Paul himself told us, hey, this is important for you guys upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Now, he believed he was living in the end of times, which, if you consider that the Torah portion says Miketz, and then it tells you at the end of 2 days, at the end of 2 full days, 2 full years, excuse me. Now, Peter will tell us that a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years is like a day. So in the last 2 days of a 7,000-year cycle of periods of time, it kind of makes sense that the last 2,000 years is the end times. It's the last 2 days of a 7-day cycle, a 7-year cycle, a 7 millennium cycle. So at the end of 2 full days also hints to some prophetic end time shadow picture stuff. But what's also interesting is that the dream is revealed to Joseph. He tells Pharaoh, this is what your dream means. Now, let me ask you a question. Who knows the secret future about what's going to happen in Egypt in the next 14 years? The government knows. Okay. Now, consider, and this looks forward into our next Torah portion just a little bit, but you'll recognize what I'm talking about. Joseph knows and Pharaoh knows. Do you think he told him in private? Do you think he told him in secret and no one else heard what was going to happen?
Yeah.
You do? Okay. Now consider this. In the next Torah portion, we find that all of the people are starting to starve to death. And they have to sell their houses, their animals, their farms, and then themselves as slaves to Pharaoh. Now, who does not sell themselves and their fields and all their stuff to the government? The priests. The priests. So what do we have here? In the land of Egypt, we have Pharaoh, his government, and the elite cadre of priests ruling the land. They're not affected by this 7 years of famine. They're set. And at the end of this 7 years of famine, the government and the priesthood controls everything. And everyone else is completely impoverished and is now, unfortunately, having to bow the knee to this beast system. It's essentially Babylon. It's a government system that is in complete control of everything, and you're beholden to them for everything, just to survive. That strikes me as being slightly end times connected to what you can see some interesting parallels in the book of Revelation to this beast system, Babylon. You know what I'm saying? And that's just one of these things. There's still a lot more, but we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the next Torah portion next Friday. If Yah wills, we will live and also be here talking about it. I'll leave you with that for now because I don't want to lead into the next Torah portion too much. But I hope that this has been useful and instructive. If nothing else, maybe you know something a little bit more interesting parallels between Yeshua and Joseph. And dig a little deeper into these Torah portions regarding what happens in Egypt during this time. There's a lot of interesting parallels between end times and these two Torah portions. Who is it? It's Cece. What's up, Cece?
Hey, so I have a question. I often have conversations with different people about the United States and whether or not we're in the Bible. Are we considered a Babylon nation or a Roman nation, or are we considered of being a part of since it's a world system?
That is, yeah. That's a great question. That is a great question, and I have often wondered about that myself. And I would say the answer to your question is, in my opinion, yes, both. We are a Babylonian nation. We are very clearly a Roman nation. I mean, Rome, it just broke up into the toes of the beast statue, right? I mean, England, Germany, all these places are Roman. They're very much Roman. The Roman Empire just disintegrated into smaller substates. It's not an empire anymore. It's like a whole bunch of Roman republics. Our system of government, it's very much identical to Rome in a lot of ways. In fact, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, there was a fascinating book written in the 1800s called The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire by Edward Gibbons. And it describes the rise and the fall of the Roman Empire. And people over the years since then have been fascinated and marveled. He was a historian who wrote a very large novel about, not a novel, but a history about this. And it was very complex. But what people were stunned by was the similarities between the United States and Rome. They're just uncanny. So yeah, the Roman Empire and the American Empire are really, really similar. Babylon, also really, really similar. Now, I know that doesn't bode well for us because we kind of look at that and go, well, my goodness, are we like the beast? We are the beast? Very likely. Unfortunately, yes. Doesn't it seem, it seems odd to me that we would be living in the most powerful nation on the planet at the end of the ages, yet the Bible doesn't mention us? You only got two options. Either our kingdom is destroyed and becomes meaningless to history, or we're just misidentified. You don't know it because you're looking at it from the lens of it doesn't exist in that form. But it is a beast system. It is a Babylonian system. It is a Roman system, very much so. So, there's that. You know what though? Here's the important part. When Yah told Jeremiah, when the people were wringing their hands going, oh my gosh, we're going into exile. What are we supposed to do? What did Yah tell the prophet Jeremiah? Live there. Have children. Pray for the peace of the city that you live in. I will bless the place because of you. Behave yourselves. This is what we talked about that when we were talking about in the book of Zechariah. Be in the world, but don't be of the world. You can live in Babylon. You can't be like Babylon, right? Who is it? It's Carla. Carla, what's the word on the street?
Well, the word on the street that I heard this week was that if you look at the dream of the cows, and you had the fat cows, and then the skinny, gaunt cows came up, and the skinny, gaunt cows ate the fat cows. If you look at them as the nations of the world, we would probably be considered a fat cow, the United States.
Sure.
But the gaunt nations, the skinny nations are going to eat us up. And when you consider all the money we give to all these nations that are needy, we may not have anything left to be eaten up by them in that regard. Just a comment.
That's a good point. You know, I would also remind you of how many times in history it has happened that power gets concentrated into the hands of a few people. And that things go beautifully for them for some time. But then the poor and the disenfranchised and the hungry and the starving always rise up and destroy the wealthy and take what they have. It has happened repeatedly throughout history, and undoubtedly it will happen again. Now, what does that mean on a local scale, on a grand scale, on a global scale? I have no idea, but you can count on it. You treat people badly long enough, they'll rise up, and they'll kill you and they'll take your stuff. It happened in the French Revolution, happened in the Russian Revolution, and happened in the American Revolution. It happens in revolutions all over the place. The Roman slaves rose up under Spartacus, right? They do it throughout history, repeatedly. You treat these people badly enough, they will rise up and kill you and take your stuff. Burn your stuff to the ground and take all your food and your money, and then you got chaos on your hands for a time until some other tyrant comes up and puts things back in order. That's how it works. Fair enough? Pray on that. What is important for you is to not be afraid of the end times. You're going to die anyway, right? Be faithful. Be a good citizen of Rome. Be a good citizen of Babylon. Pray for your neighbors. Be righteous. Don't go down with the ship. Because remember, God has miraculous intervention and salvation for you wherever you are, if you are faithful. Right? Shows it in his Torah, shows it in the Inner Testament, shows it in the New Testament all the time. You can be delivered. And he says to us regarding the end times, pray that you may be considered to be worthy to escape all that is coming upon the earth. That means, oh, that's the cat trying to escape. So be praying that you might be considered worthy. And what's important too is that you understand what it means to be worthy. What does it mean to be worthy? How does Yeshua say it? Everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. So make that your aim. Love one another. Then you can be considered worthy. Fair enough? Let us pray. No, wait. Sir Seal, you get the last word.
Sorry, can I have that verse in Zechariah that you was referring to?
Oh, I don't have it off the top of my head. Maybe someone can put it, as I am praying, someone will Google it and throw it into the, keep your eye peeled. You're going to hear a beep and they're going to give you the text. Somebody look it up for Sir Seal and tell her where it's at. That passage in Zechariah. Are you talking about... Are you talking about where it says, go and live in Babylon and do what is right? Or okay, that's not in Jeremiah. Oh, that's in Jeremiah. That's not in Zechariah.
Jeremiah. Okay.
Yeah, Tracy, if you wouldn't mind, or somebody look it up and put it in the chat box. Thank you, guys. Let's pray.